Since the dawn of time, humanity has wrestled with one profound question. And that question is, does the universe point us towards God or towards science? Atheists often argue that only empirical evidence can explain this existence, while believers see divine wisdom written into the very fabric of creation. But the real question is, what if these two perspectives are not enemies, but rather reflections of the same truth? The Quran, that was revealed over 1,400 years ago, contains verses that astonishingly align with the modern scientific discoveries, from the expansions of the universe to the origins of life and water, to the intricate stages of human development. This is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. We'll explore the paradox science versus God, or perhaps science with God. This is going to be a dialogue between reason and revelation, which will show you how both can coexist in perfect harmony. The first point of view I'm going to be continuing on, based on this introduction, is the atheist point of view. Now, when an atheist and a Muslim perhaps are having a debate whether if God is real or not, atheists most likely, or actually the majority of atheists, will always rely on science. They answer the philosophical question of existentialism through science and through philosophy. They believe that due to scientific hypothesis, due to the differentiation of evolution from Lamarck and Darwin, we can conclude, we know that this universe has been created not because of a creator, rather they say because of the Big Bang. They explain the evolutionary characteristics, they explain the evolutionary adaptations, and they come and say, we will only believe in God if you provide us empirical evidence, something that can be backed up, something, a sort of knowledge that can be tested. How do I know that God exists? Where's your proof that God exists? I want you to give me that proof. This is what atheists are going to roam about. And the majority of times, it's not only this, rather they have multiple questions. But for now, I won't make this topic extremely long by going on all of them. For example, one of the things I could be talking about in this topic is the aspect of having free will, the aspect of God allowing suffering to happen in this world. Why would God, a whole loving God, would love, or not love, rather would be able to accept such things to happen, or people dying and animals suffering? This is one of the things that atheists usually come at. But this is not exactly what we're going to look at currently in this podcast or in this video. What we're going to do is talk about the various Quranic verses and the various religious aspects, point of views of how to answer this very much of a paradox. First of all, this is where I'm going to come in and start. I'm going to say that the Quran, and not only the Quran, not only the verses of the Quran, which I'm actually about to come into, and various other aspects of life show us and inevitably show that there has to be a creator. Before I start mentioning the Quranic verses, or start even mentioning the religious aspect of this, I will first talk about science. When we're looking at science in itself, when we're looking at statistics, when we're looking at probability, how do we conclude, us, for example, me as a Muslim, or someone else who's a Christian, or someone else who believes in a one creator, how do we conclude based on these educated aspects that yes, there is a creator? We can say that 100% there is a creator. First of all, I will talk about the cosmologist Alexander Vilenkin. And for those who don't know what cosmology is, it is the study of the beginning of the universe. How did the universe begin? Alexander Vilenkin, who was a prominent theoretical physicist and cosmologist, has stated that all the evidence in the universe indicates that there has been a beginning. Before, in historical ancient times, people never really knew how the universe began. That is why most of them started to actually believe in a God. They believed in a higher power. They knew that it wasn't just based on randomness. But now, as we have proposed higher educative skills and we have more knowledge on science, more knowledge on cosmology, more knowledge on astrology, more knowledge on how all of these planets are working, more knowledge on how these stars are working, now we know that there is a beginning to this universe. An atheist is going to come and say, okay, that is true. We agree. We agree that there is a beginning to this universe. And that beginning of the universe is caused by the Big Bang, which they call the Big Bang theory, of the explosion of a star that created, or a random explosion that created the chain of new Milky Way galaxies, that created the change of new nebulas exploding, creating other new galaxies, the universe being expanded over a period of time. But what a religious person comes back and says, for example, as the example I will give today is the Muslim, since I am a Muslim myself. If we go to the Quran, to chapter 51, verse 49, God says, and of everything we have created pairs, that you may take heed, meaning that you may take in mind, that you may start thinking. Now, what does this mean? Everything we have created is in pairs. A part of the example as the one I have given in this lecture, or if you want to call a podcast, is homologous chromosomal pairs. Every single human being has one pair of genes, one pair of chromosomes from their parents, from their father, and another pair from their mother. If you go look at the various asexual predators, if you go look at sexual predators that need and provide a male and a female gamete to interconnect to propose another fertile offspring. This is what the two pairs concept is talking about. God has created everything within two pairs. You can think of it as a fruit. You can think of it as a mammal. You can think of it as any type of organism. Everything has two pairs. Now, some may say, okay, what does this have to do with anything? What this has to do is people have to start understanding that the Quran was revealed in an ignorant period. In Arabic, they call it al-Jahiliyyah. This period is called the period of ignorance within the Arab community. It is known to have people of Arabia that didn't even practice reading, didn't even practice writing, which is one of the reasons why the controversy came to the Prophet that he does not know how to read or write, which is obviously false, but that's a whole other topic that we don't want to talk about right now. But the point is that all of these verses that I'm about to mention were in a place, this is where you have to take note, right? You have to make sure of this, you have to understand and put this back in your mind. These types of words were brought down in a place where people didn't even read or write, meaning that everyone was basically ignorant. A verse such as that, when the Prophet started to come and say such things, this is why many people started to believe. They knew that something divine had to have come. That is one of the points that I want to mention.
Yeah.
Another point I want to mention is that God said in the Quran in chapter 51, verse 52, we have created the universe and we have... Wait, no, sorry, that was not the right verse. The right verse was chapter 51, verse 47. We built the universe with great might, and we are certainly expanding it. Now let's pause right there before we continue. After noting that these verses are going down, they're being sent through Angel Gabriel in a certain point where everyone in Arabia was not practicing reading and writing. And then when you come and see a verse that says, we built the universe with great might, and we are certainly expanding it. Now, this was 1,400 years ago, close to a millennium. Something that is that complex and that is that elaborate with specifications that the universe is going to be expanded and we have created it in might. We mentioning that God and the angels that he put to work in. That is what we is mentioned for those who want to ask a question on why the subjective term we was put there. But anyways, continuing further. God said 1,400 years ago, displaying within the Quran, that we have created this universe in great might and we are certainly expanding it. And then modern scientists come and realize, and when I say modern, I'm obviously talking about through maybe the last 300 to 500 years, because that's how modern is identified in science's history. But anyways, when we're looking at modern scientists, they're looking at the universe expanding. They realize that black holes are also expanding. They also realize that no matter how fast you go in the speed of light, no matter how fast you are, even in the speed of light, multiplied by the speed of light, however number you want, the closer you go to the edge of the universe, the more it will expand. Think of it like you are trying to follow your shadow. You're trying to catch your shadow. You keep running. No matter how fast you run, you will never get to the edge of the universe. This is what cosmologists have realized. This is what physicists has realized over a long period of time. The universe is certainly expanding. Now, when a rational person comes in that has no bias on a certain religion, if you read such thing, there is no way you're going to conclude and say, okay, that's actually not true. Wait, that is a lie. Wait, okay, it might have been rigged. There is absolutely no excuse that can be made of a verse that has been sent down upon a prophet 1,400 years ago, where no one actually had a certain idea of how the universe even is created. They didn't even have knowledge about the moon. They didn't even have knowledge about the sun, which is why they were asking the prophet in the period of Ramadan, when do we fast? When do we not fast? When do we fast? When do we eat? When do we stop our fast? When do we break our fast? What I'm trying to say is, at such a period of time, there is only one rational decision to make, is that the Prophet Muhammad has definitely had a divine sent message by God, the most knowledgeable, the omniscient, who came down and gave him that knowledge. This is one of the most crucial points that I'm coming here to answer. Now that we continue and go to another Bible verse, not a Bible verse, my bad, a Quranic verse. If you go to chapter 55, verse 19 to 20, God says he merges the two bodies of fresh and salt water. Now, what does this mean, right? If you know oceanography, you would know that there is a distinct difference between salt water and clear drinkable water. It's not necessarily drinkable, but salty water and non-salty water. This is what the differentiation of salinity is called in biology. There is one part of the water that is darker, and there is another part of the water that is clear. This distinction specified in the Quran 1,400 years ago, God saying that he merged the two bodies of fresh salt and water, differentiating a barrier of salinity, not making any of them connect with one another, mentioning this 1,400 years ago in a place where people stopped reading, people stopped practicing writing. That is not something that is to be made up. That is a divine book. That is a divine written book made to show people, look at what we have created. This is what God has created. This is my creation. And that is the ocean and barriers. That is another Quranic verse. And we go to another one. Water as the origin of life. If you go to the Quran in chapter 21, verse 30, God says, we made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe? What does this align? What do you guys think? Every single biological living organism needs water. This is why water is the essential for life. This is why water is the most universal solvent. Without water, life is not possible. As a matter of fact, God also mentions in other verses that we have brought down water from the skies and the heavens to bring the dead land back to life. If God doesn't bring down the rain, even though we have fresh water on earth, the salinity and the nutrients within the water that goes back due to precipitation and evaporation is not the same as the fresh water that we have in rivers and landscapes. Without rainwater over a long period of time, drought will occur. The nutrients are not going to be enough. The chemical reactions, all of the chemical reactions that have occurred during the evaporation period and the precipitation period, they will not provide efficient nutrients for the soil within the plant. All of these verses mentioned right now show us that this has something to do with the divine relationship of the prophet, since he is the one who was telling this physically, and God, the one who brought the word down. Now, what does this conclude to? What this concludes to is that God and science are not actually a universal paradox. Rather, they interconnect with one another. God as the creator. What is God actually? Now that I'm thinking about it, now that everyone here is obviously thinking about it, what is God? How does he express himself, right? Did you ever think of that question? God expresses himself by using elements and matter. Now, what does that mean? If you want to see God, look at the various creations that he has made. God is his creation. Now, this might be really difficult to grasp at first, but what this basically means is that the beauty of God, the knowledge of God, the wisdom of God relies upon his creation. The way how systematically and statistically, if the moon was not in its exact space, not in its exact diameter, not in its exact inch of orbiting around the earth, the universe would not have a perfect gravitational force to withstand us and intelligent life. And we're talking about seconds or diameters or even small inches of difference. If that small inch of difference of that exact orientation of the sun, of the exact orientation of the moon, of the exact orientation of Mercury, if all of those planets are not orbiting the sun properly in those exact same diameters and those exact same circumference in every single mathematical calculation you can think of, intelligent life will not be possible on Earth. Everything has been calculated extremely efficiently. Everything has been calculated in a complex manner. This shows overall that there is no possible way this life has been created without a creator. There is no possible way the intelligent life through the universe, through the ventilation system, through gas exchange of a human being, through the cardiovascular system, looking at the human body in itself, studying how there are millions of billions of neurons that are working in your body as you move. There is a pulse, a static electricity force that comes from a neural brain that comes in various aspects. All of these neural signaling pathways, where if you move, acetylcholine, which is a hormone, releases from your brain. It goes extremely fast through your muscle fibers and it allows you to contract. With various enzymes, metabolic reactions, all of these various aspects of life, all of these various aspects of human physiology proves that there is no way we have came here randomly. Rather, there is a creator. There is an intelligent creator that has created us. Now, I don't want to be so long and to continue on how science and God actually interconnect. I will lastly end with the Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence is a mathematical calculation you will find in geometry, which shows and states a calculation of a circumference of a spiral. It's basically the calculation of a spiral. That's what it is. How big is a spiral? How wide is a spiral? And that's what I'm about to continue. The Fibonacci sequence shows us the spiral of various aspects in life, various objects, various matter, types of matter, phases of matter. That's what it shows. Let's start with the fingerprint. Distinctively, no one has the same DNA fingerprints as everyone having a distinguished different fingerprint, and that is a spiral. If you look at the top of your head, it is a spiral. If you look at every single planet, it is a circular, oval shape that is a spiral and goes in the center, that goes back to the center. If you go look at a branch of a tree, ancient historical tribes, when they wanted to see what year they were in, or when they wanted to calculate age of a tree, they'd go and look at the spiral of the tree branch after they break it down. If you look at a nebula that explodes and creates a galaxy, it is a spiral. Our Milky Way galaxy is a spiral. Now, what does this mean? What am I yapping about here, right? That's probably what you're asking. This spiral, this Fibonacci sequence, provides us the signature for God. As we all know, every single artist, after they're done drawing, they leave down their signatures. And God's signature is this Fibonacci sequence. He is showing us that your eyes, the red blood cells that are moving in your eyes, the veins that are within your eyes, look like lightning strikes. Now, this might sound crazy, but if you go look at any Google image right now and see the veins that are within your eyes that are providing the blood back to your heart, and you compare them to the high electrostatic force, a visual image of high electrostatic force within a lightning image, you'll see that they look exactly the same. That is because there is a designer of this world. Atheist scientists hide God. They use terminologies to hide God. They use terminologies such as the black hole. They use terminologies such as the Big Bang. They use terminologies such as adapted or have evolved. They never say the species has been designed to camouflage. So, for example, as the iguana, the African iguana has a green camouflage to hide within the forest to avoid predators. They wouldn't say that. They would say the green iguana has adapted, the African iguana, or they call the genus name, and they'd say the iguana had adapted to have green color to camouflage and to avoid predators. The point is, atheists are trying to hide God. And since they rely on science, they come and say that, oh, look, religion doesn't rely on science. They believe in skeptical things that don't back up in their evidence. There is no empirical evidence in what you guys believe in. But then if you study the Quran, if you study the verses that I have just said, how would a God, how would a prophet say something that is allegedly coming from a God, that is allegedly coming from the most knowledgeable, who was the one who created us, that we have created the universe in might, and we are certainly expanding it? How would someone that has no knowledge, that had never made an experiment, that has never studied biology in their life, that had never studied astrophysics in their life, how would they know? A person who never studied cosmology, how would they know that God said, that they literally said it by mouth? Prophet Muhammad said it by mouth, that we have created the universe in might and we are certainly expanding it. And he said that is what God said. When you come and tell that an atheist, how will they respond? In what certain rational manner can they say that, no, we can't agree with this, no, this is false? There is no disagreement. To conclude this video, God and science aren't actually different. Science does not disprove God. Rather, science provides evidence for God. You see how atheists have made this a dilemma? Do you see how atheists have made this a universal paradox? They want to use science to disprove God, but all along, God and science are interchangeably connected. God is science. God is the omniscient. God is the creator. God is the photographer. Learning the Quran will give you wisdom. Reading the Quran will give you insight of what this life is and what the afterlife is like. Do not be deceived and believe that science disproves God. Rather see that God has created this universe and he is science with himself. Remember, God uses elements and matter to express himself. So when we're looking at all the phases of matter, gas, liquid, plasma, and solids, you'd see in every single way God is expressing himself through the signatures that I have mentioned, the Fibonacci sequence, and all of these complex human anatomy, various structures of the bones, everything interconnectively working together to make you live, to make you hear this video right now. The laws of vibration and frequency that are taking right now as I am talking, that are taking the sound waves, that are releasing sound waves out of my trachea, the trachea box and the voice box, and releasing it into the microphone. All of these aspects, you being able to hear me right now, is only possible because God made it. And how did he make it? It is through the scientific explanations. This means that if you want to understand God, you have to understand science. Peace be upon you all, and thank you for watching this video. If you love this podcast, or if you love this elaborative explanation of this dilemma, science versus God, which is a universal paradox, which I have just explained. Obviously, there are way much more things that I haven't mentioned. That is because the video does not allow me to. The amount of time is going to be extremely crucial, which I might consider based on comments. Whatever you guys want to know, whatever you guys want to see, let me know. But this is the first episode of my podcast channel. I love to call it a podcast is because I'm thinking about basically talking to you guys. Now, there's one thing I do want to mention. Some might say that I was pro-religious or that I was pro-Islamic, meaning that I was basically speaking in a way where I was mostly talking about the religious aspect of it, or the more of connecting into the verses rather than going a lot in science. What I basically mean is, I know that there's not an opposing voice right now. There's not someone who's an atheist is talking to me or responding to my points. However, what I do know is that I made sure that I provided empirical evidence, that I provided evidence that is backed up. I mentioned the names of the verses. Think of this as an APA citation. I have cited where the sources of my speaking is coming from, meaning that this isn't just an opinion, rather it's a backed up base fact, is what I'm trying to say. However, whatever types of videos you guys want next, whatever topic you want me to delve into, let me know in the comments. And if you have liked this video so far, please go ahead and drop a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.